Israel no longer has any hostages, alive or deceased, in the Gaza Strip. The people of Israel live, Am Israel Chai, and in the last 24 hours we succeeded in bringing everyone back, all the way to the very last hostage. In order to finally locate and retrieve the remains of fallen hostage Ran Gaveli, the IDF launched Operation Braveheart on Saturday morning that continued for almost 72 hours, examining the remains that were retrieved from one grave after another in a cemetery in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip. And meanwhile, tensions in the Middle East are rising to another level. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps deployed anti-ship missiles along the Persian Gulf Coast, signaling danger for oil tankers and other traffic through the strategic waterway. The American aircraft carrier Abraham Lincoln has officially arrived in the Middle East region and will be in attack posture within 24 hours, despite the serious danger threatening it, and President Trump is considering imposing a naval blockade on Iran similar to Venezuela. For their part, the IRGC forces are rising the level of threats and organizing to respond to the American moves, while from inside, Iranian citizens are exposing the horrors of the regime's crackdown over recent weeks. But America is also playing mind games with the Revolutionary Guards, saying that the door to a diplomatic solution with Iran has not been closed, but a military strike is still on the table, while everyone can see that the engines are being warmed up. Elsewhere, just before the next step regarding Gaza's future and the test of the seriousness of the terrorist organization Hamas, we hear Netanyahu's threat to Iran and to Hezbollah, warning that all the cards are on the table. Welcome to Boots on the Ground. I'm your host Yair Pinto, bringing you the whole truth about what's happening in Israel. The terrorist organization Hamas did not comply with the ceasefire agreement, and the last hostage was extracted by Israeli forces using the same intelligence that had already been passed several times to them in order to bring him back. The operation was a logistical miracle. 20 dentists examined 250 sets of remains in 24 hours with the assistance of numerous reserve forces in a special operation led by the Shin Bet, guided by through the intelligence, preparation, and it all came after the political echelon stopped the IDF from searching for Ran Gaveli in the cemetery where he was ultimately located. The tip which led them back to this location was provided during an interrogation of a Palestinian Islamic Jihad terrorist, and the rest is rapidly becoming history. President Trump reacted to the news by declaring that the table is clean. We delivered all the goods, and now his peace council is preparing to activate the Rafah crossing, which is the next step in phase B of the ceasefire plan. Israel fears that Hamas will fake disarmament, and therefore we will bring you the document taking shape which promises that if Hamas does not disarm, Israel will be able to act. This American document will also provide details about how Hamas is expected to disarm, according to which Israel will allow the opening of the crossings and the rehabilitation of the Gaza Strip, and Hamas will have a few weeks to hand over its weapons to the multinational forces. If Hamas does not meet the deadline, Israel will be authorized to act militarily as it wishes. Meanwhile, the prospects for a military strike on Iran are growing, as President Trump described the situation as fluid, as he has sent an armada to this region, but he also says that the diplomacy is still possible because they want to talk, according to him. And at the same time, sources in the Middle East told the New York Times that concerns is growing that a strike will be carried out in the coming days, and an American source told the newspaper the aircraft carrier Lincoln will reach a possible strike position this week. In Israel's northern arena, the Air Force eliminated Hezbollah operatives, and this week in the Nabatea area in southern Lebanon, multiple targets were struck. The IDF emphasized that the strike was intended to thwart immediate terrorist activities, and meanwhile, senior Hezbollah officials continue to issue war threats towards Israel. And elsewhere, the United Nations Special Envoy on Iran warned that during the crackdown on protesters, security forces raided hospitals, arrested wounded protesters, and demanded ransom from the families of the fallen. All serious violations of the international law. Has the United Nations accidentally done something useful for a change? We will bring you all the information about the horrors of the Revolutionary Guards in Iran and the United Nations' highly unusual reaction. We have a lot to talk about today, so let's dive into the details. I'm Yair Pinto, and this is your Boots on the Ground report, bringing you the whole truth about what's happening in Israel on day 845 of the war against Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, the Shia militias in Iraq, and all the other armed groups in this region that are operating under the control of the Revolutionary Guards Corps in Iran, which is the head of the crumbling axis of evil in the Middle East. And today, I'm excited to say that it is time to take down the yellow ribbon. For 11 years, we no longer have any hostages alive or deceased in the Gaza Strip. 1 second before we begin, the truth is the most important thing. And that's why we work day and night to bring it to you. And we need your help in order to give what is really happening in Israel to the rest of the world. So share this content with as many people as possible. Hit the subscribe button so you never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. The big news was heard yesterday at noon, inside the cemetery in the heart of the Gaza Strip. After more than 24 hours of digging and examining one set of remains after another, the 250th set of remains that was examined was identified as belonging to Master Sergeant Ran Gaveli of blessed memory. In that moment, for the first time since 2014, there are no more hostages living or deceased on the soil of the Gaza Strip. It didn't come as a favor or a goodwill gesture or because of an agreement. It came because of the determination to finish the difficult and dangerous work in enemy territory while under fire. The operation was called Braveheart, and it lasted almost 72 hours. It began on Saturday morning, and the leading force was the combat team of the Alexandroni Brigade under Division 252, as well as Yalam Combat Engineering Forces, along with the rescue personnel from the Home Front Command and the military rabbinate, assisted by the directed unit of the medical identifications from the Medical Corps of the IDF. This was not a random search. It was a story of intelligence, cross-checking, validation, and slow movement between hypotheses. There were several options for where to start looking, but in the end, the choice was made to begin in a cemetery located east of the Yellow Line in an area under full IDF control. In the first 2 days of the operation, Yalam fighters checked a tunnel with precise attention and determined that Ran's remains were not in it, so the work moved to the cemetery, which was on the western side of the Yellow Line. This required the deployment of a heavy security detail in order to secure the complex operation. That's not a pretty sentence. This was a decision that puts a very large number of people at risk in order to bring the remains of one hostage back home. But in parallel to the work, the intelligence work continued to press forward based on data collection from a variety of sources, cross-checks, analysis, and constant validation. About a month ago, as part of the intelligence operation in the southern parts of Gaza City, a Palestinian Islamic Jihad operative was taken for interrogation. He was suspected of knowing details about the burial location, and under interrogation, he spoke about involvement in transferring the remains between several locations, ending with burial in the El Batza cemetery in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip. That allowed for the deployment of search teams in that area, and the process of identification began, which involved dentists examining the remains that were found in the cemetery to see if they matched the records of Ran Gaveli. The gruesome but necessary work was not carried out in a sterile lab. The smell was horrible and would have been worse if it wasn't so cold, while the sights and the sounds were very unpleasant as well. The teams had to work without sleep for almost 24 hours until around 1:30 p.m. on Monday, when a dentist from the police forensic identification lab found a match. Another dentist confirmed the match, and after that, The final identification was made at the Abu Kabir Institute for Forensic Medicine in cooperation with the Israel police and the military rabbinate, the rabbis of the IDF. And then the message went out to the family. Ran was identified and he would be returned for burial in Israel. I have to explain something here because this was something unique in Israeli history. Ran Gaveli's body was kidnapped on the morning of October 7, 2023, after he fell in battle. He was a soldier in the elite Yassam unit, 24 years of age, and he has been described as the first to go out, the last to return, and in the end, that is precisely what happened. Another detail that has emerged is that when he fell in battle, he was wearing his dark blue police uniform, and this caused him to be mistaken for a Hamas terrorist. So, in the confusion, his body was buried in a mass grave together with Hamas terrorists who had been eliminated in the fighting that day. Now, the circle has been completed, and he's finally home. The Israel Police Commissioner spoke with his father, Yitzhak, on the phone on Monday evening, saying simply, he was found intact, with his uniform and everything on him. He even mentioned a tear in his pants, something that returned in the descriptions from before his death. So if I can tell you this from my heart, as an Israeli and as a father, this is a heartbreaking moment for this nation. We are the people of Israel, and the people of Israel live. In Hebrew, Am Yisrael Chai. We are ready to risk everything for every one of us, alive or deceased. The family said that those who took him out of that cursed place are IDF soldiers, and they are proud, and their pride is stronger than their sorrow. The formal funeral is set for Wednesday in the community of Meitar, but the story doesn't end with a grave at home. It starts again in the political arena because Hamas already rushed to try and cash in, issuing a statement as if it provided information about the location of the body in order to push for phase B of the ceasefire plan. In practice, according to what was clarified in the security establishment, the intelligence information was already in the hands of the IDF beforehand and had been passed into the mediators weeks ago, so Hamas was forced to issue a statement now so it would not be seen as someone who is not cooperating. This is a classic tactic of governmental survival, taking something that already happened and paint it as your own achievement. But it's not only public relations, but a clear interest because Hamas wants the reconstruction in the Gaza Strip that is part of Phase B without disarmament. From its perspective, stopping the fighting, withdrawing forces, and a partial arrangement is a turning point that allows it to recover, reorganize, and preserve the military capabilities that remain. It wants the war to end, but for the military wing not to be dismantled and the tunnels not to be handed over. They think that they can score a strategic victory just by surviving. That is why Hamas is also pushing the idea of a technocratic committee. Outwardly, it sounds like professional and civilian management, but in practice, it could be a civilian shell administering reconstruction but without real power that allows Hamas to remain the landlord behind the scenes. However, there are those who warned that even this is not neutral, since it is claimed that most of its members of this proposed technocratic committee come from Fatah areas and the Palestinian Authority with a past in mechanisms. This includes tens of thousands of officials in the Gaza Strip who have managed day-to-day life for many long years, received salaries from Hamas, and are loyal to it. If they remain, so does Hamas control, even if the sign over the door will change to a technocratic government. And that brings us to the Americans. President Trump is warming up the engines, and his peace council is pushing forward to the next step, opening the Rafah border crossing, and according to the plan, the crossing already has a European observer force, together with local Palestinian workers. The plan at this point is for a gradual start, with exit and entry of about 100 to 150 people every day in the first stage. This mechanism is built on lists provided by Egypt and passed to Israel's Shin Bet for security vetting. Whoever is approved enters or exits the next day. There is also an inspection corridor outside the crossing compound, but no physical IDF inspection at the crossing itself, but there is Israeli oversight in the area. It is a model that tries to combine movement with control. However, amidst all of this, there is still the question of Hamas's weapons. Senior American officials emphasized full coordination with Israel, and the Gaza rehabilitation will not begin before Hamas is disarmed. At the same time, an American document is being prepared that details how the disarmament is supposed to be carried out. According to the framework, Israel will allow the opening of the crossings and the start of rehabilitation, while Hamas will get a few weeks to hand over weapons to a multinational force. But if Hamas does not meet the deadline, Israel will be authorized to act as it wishes. Israel is insisting on one principle: no more rehabilitation that feeds terror. If Hamas does not disarm, the operational mandate changes. It shifts from a policy of managing a process to a policy of free action, and that is exactly what Hamas is trying to prevent. So yes, in Gaza, there are no more hostages, and that is a tremendous achievement and the end of a painful chapter. But this is not the end of the story, because Hamas in Gaza still exists. And now the real test begins. Will Hamas hand over its weapons, or will it stall, lie, and use the Rafah border crossing and the technocratic government to rebuild itself, forcing the IDF to return with full force to erase it? Let me know what you think about this. And meanwhile, the entire Middle East is holding its breath as the USS Abraham Lincoln has arrived in the waters off Iran's coast, and US forces all over the region are posed to strike the Ayatollah regime, and everywhere everybody is wondering what the Revolutionary Guards will do in response. And here at TBN Israel, we will be here to report about all the details and all the truth about what's happening. So share this content with as many people as possible and click that subscribe button so that you stay tuned to the truth in real time and never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. Also, if you love TBN Israel and want to be part of what God is doing in this land, we have something special for you. Visit our official online store at shop.tbnisrael.com. Again, that's shop.tbnisrael.com, and there you'll find high-quality TBN Israel merchandise, items that help you stay connected, share the message, and support our mission of bringing the truth, the hope, and the faith straight from Israel to the nations. Every purchase that you make helps strengthen our work here on the ground and allows us to continue reporting, teaching, and sharing what's happening in Israel from a biblical perspective. So, whether you're looking for a meaningful gift, something to wear that represents your faith, or a simple way to stand with Israel, we invite you to visit our store today. So go to shop.tbnisrael.com. Again, that's shop.tbnisrael.com and be part of the team. By the way, this is one of the shirts that are in the shop. And now we're getting back into the news and shifting our focus to the Iranian issue, because the strike group of the American aircraft carrier Abraham Lincoln has officially entered the area of responsibility of the United States Central Command and will soon be in position for an attack on the Ayatollah regime. The group includes ships that are armed with weapons that can hit Iranian targets from great distances. This is beyond the effective range of any Iranian weapons that might be fired back at them. The moment is approaching when all the pieces will be in place, and the only thing left will be for President Trump to give the order to attack. Or not. In response, the Revolutionary Guards have deployed defensive systems and anti-ship missiles along the southern coast, with an emphasis on the Strait of Hormuz and the Persian Gulf. But it is a coastline more than 2,400 kilometers long. Within this area, Iran is emphasizing strategic points like Qasem Island and Bandar Abbas, which connect geographically, and maritime movements and the ability to control routes. And speaking of routes, the Iranian deployment is also intended to enter a closure of the Strait of Hormuz to reach about 20% of a daily global oil shipments pass. Therefore, every movement there will not just be another headline, but another threat to the global energy prices and to the stability of countries far from this region. The IRGC forces are also reportedly preparing for the possibility of a ground invasion and infiltration from the sea. The Americans have many options, as there are reports of broad American reinforcements, including squadrons of fighter jets and refueling aircrafts, alongside C-17 transport aircrafts that landed in the area with heavy equipment. This is a deployment of military assets that will allow the United States to continue fighting around the clock for months, because the United States is making sure that the military option is credible, not a slogan. However, the danger to the Lincoln does not come only from anti-ship missiles. A focused warning has been issued from Israeli intelligence about Iran's UAV array, which can fire hundreds of cheap weapons at the American ships and saturate the defenses, which are designed to defend against just a few high-end threats at a time. Iran's leaders appear to know that this is what's happening and have begun issuing many more threats specifically against the carrier, saying any scenario based on surprise is a miscalculation that can get out of control quickly. This is not only psychological warfare, it is a cognitive preparation for the public and for players in this region in the case a blow comes. For their part, the Americans do not appear to be impressed. On the one hand, the president says that he sent a large armada near Iran and makes clear that the situation is fluid. On the other hand, he leaves an opening for diplomacy and says explicitly they want to make a deal, meaning he is holding both buttons on the same table: military pressure that can turn into an order alongside a door that has not yet been closed to a conversation. But what is the precise form of the pressure if the president does not want a prolonged war? One possibility is a naval blockade, as the administration is examining the possibility of imposing a blockade that would prevent Iran from exploring its oil abilities, cannot sell them. It's similar to the step that was taken in the past against Venezuela. The advantage is clear according to the logic that when there are currently no active protests by the regime opponents, sharp economic pressure can try to bring the street back into the game and then shake the regime from within by the people of Iran. But that also does not come in a vacuum. The protests against the Revolutionary Guards have been a bloody internal struggle in Iran since the end of December, with some reports estimating a death toll exceeding 40,000. So clearly the country is burning from within, and the regime is using extreme force to stay in power. It's gotten so bad in Iran that even the United Nations Special Envoy on Iran issued a report this week warning about an unusual and harsh pattern in suppressing the protests. This includes raids on hospitals. She also described a chilling effect, as people are afraid to seek medical care because they fear they will be arrested, and families were required to pay a huge ransom to receive the bodies of their loved ones back. From here, the American pressure gains a context as not only a nuclear or a regional threat, but also a response to what is described as an internal massacre by the regime against its citizens. Some analysts have criticized President Trump for backing down from a threat to strike the regime while the protests were still ongoing, while others give him credit for going for a targeted and meaningful action without entering prolonged fighting. These analysts point to the search for meaningful targets that were directly associated with human rights violations during the protests. And in any event, the clock is ticking, and the Lincoln will soon be in position to launch an attack. That's the aircraft carrier, and it can't stay there forever. It is needed elsewhere in the world, as are other American military assets that have been deployed close to Iran in the Middle East. So Israel's security establishment assesses that the Americans will update the IDF a short time before they begin the strike, but the public in Israel will not be informed in order to prevent a leak that would endanger the success of the operation. However, the IDF is currently preparing for all contingencies, including the possibility that the northern border could heat up. The Americans are also preparing for the possibility that the IRGC proxies in Iraq could attack US bases there. So to sum up, the whole region is holding its breath as the American and the Iranian forces face off, along with their allies on both sides, while inside Iran, the population is being crushed and waiting for assistance. And here, at TBN Israel, we will continue to spread the truth. So share, follow us, most importantly, hit that subscribe button so that you never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. And now, we are switching our focus to the northern arena, because this week, the Air Force struck 2 Hezbollah figures in the Nabatea area. The IDF said that the goal was the immediate neutralization of terror activity based on updated intelligence in order to prevent harm to the IDF forces and to civilians in Israel. This strike does not stand alone. It is another link in an enforcement sequence that has continued since the ceasefire, and it is meant to keep Hezbollah down in real time. Anytime Hezbollah infrastructure south of the Litani River is discovered, the IDF immediately hits it. However, they often operate from within populated areas and near civilian infrastructure in southern Lebanon. And here, the Israeli policy, since the ceasefire comes in, a routine of fighting through relatively small enforcement strikes in an unceasing sequence of disrupt rehabilitation and preserve of deterrence. But with the tensions surrounding a possible strike on Iran, Hezbollah is becoming strategically relevant once more. Hezbollah's Secretary General Naim Qassem delivered a harsh speech this week declaring that the organization is not neutral when it comes to Iran. He referred to threats against Ali Khamenei and claimed that it is the responsibility of all of us to stand up against such a threat. However, he left himself some room to maneuver on the question of whether Hezbollah would attack Israel in response to an American attack on Iran, saying they would choose the appropriate timing for how to act with intervention or without intervention. And this is according to the circumstances and the interests. And Israel's intelligence echelon believes he is not just talking, but has serious plans. The commander of the IDF Northern Command made it clear that the IDF is prepared also for a scenario in which Hezbollah assists Tehran, then Israel sees Iran, Lebanon, and the Houthis as one connected system. So if Tehran chooses to escalate, it could pressure its proxies to enter the picture, each in its own way. And still, even after the hard blows Hezbollah has taken in the past year, the data points to a force that remains dangerous. And according to data presented in recent months by the American officials, Hezbollah still has about 40,000 operatives and between 15,000 and 20,000 rockets and missiles. The Lebanese army declared the disarmament of Hezbollah south of the Litani River as part of a plan by the government in Beirut, but in Jerusalem, they cast doubt on any substantive change in this ground. And meanwhile, in Washington, a senior American official said that Hezbollah likely will not disarm willingly unless Iran itself will fail. And that same official cast heavy doubt on Hezbollah's threat, describing them as empty, but in the same breath emphasized an expectation for more action against Hezbollah if it does not disarm, even while Israel is focusing on the Iranian arena in the first days and weeks of the major event. To sum up, the ground in Lebanon is quietly boiling, and the strikes are continuing. The threats rise, and Iran's clock drags everyone to the edge. One thing that you can be sure of is that here at TBN Israel, we'll continue to bring you the whole details of what's happening. So we call on you to pray for the situation. Only God has the answers. We know He's in charge, so keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.